Have you all consented?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Ha ha ha. Now your souls are in my hands. So, yes, hello there, everyone. Welcome, settle in with your favorite crack pipe. It's film crack time. And as usual, it is me, Clive, and him,
Nick.
And we have a guest and a guest curator for this episode. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hello, everyone. This is Geno Cuddy. How are you?
And hopefully everybody said great.
Yeah, I didn't hear them. But,
hope you're all doing great. I'm suspecting they all said great.
And so we're, yes, as usual, tackling film a little bit off the radar, off the map. But thanks to Geno, because this is actually available on his YouTube channel, Geno's House of Rare Sitcoms.
Correction, Geno's House of Rare Films.
Oh, has it changed, is it?
Yes.
That's probably a good idea, considering there were no actual sitcoms on the channel. I was curious about that. Was that the original idea, that there were going to be rare sitcom episodes?
Yes. Originally, I wanted to, with the Geno's House of Rare, then it was known as Geno's House of Rare Sitcoms. Originally, it was going to be me culling a lot of unreleased sitcoms, you know, from television's past and uploading them to YouTube. Like one of my more famous uploads on the original Geno's House of Rare Sitcoms YouTube channel was the 1982 Demond Wilson and Ron Glass remake of The Odd Couple, entitled The New Odd Couple, where they essentially reused the old scripts from the Jack Klugman and Tony Randall show, and just, I don't want to say it like this, but they sort of urbanized it for, you know, a predominantly African-American audience. So Ron Glass played Felix, and Demond Wilson from Sanford and Son played Oscar Madison. And so I had uploaded about 5 episodes of that from an old DVD I got on iOffer. Remember iOffer?
No, that I missed that, I guess.
I think they're still around, I think.
No, they're gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, iOffer was this great website where you could get like rare movies and TV shows that nobody else had on like blank DVD-Rs for like a steal, you know, and sometimes you get stuff on like hard drives and whatever. So unfortunately that well dried up, you know.
The last time I used it was years ago. I bought some rare Kung Fu film from some dealer on there, but I didn't realize it had dried up.
Yeah, so then I started, you know, perusing, you know, said, okay, I'm not able to get sitcoms, but what else can I get? Oh, I could get some really shitty Ray Don home video movies, like Provoked with American.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Alien Private Eye, crap like that, you know, Hard Rock Nightmare, stuff like that, you know, stuff that like nobody had ever heard of, that everybody was clamoring to see. You know, and then I would get slammed with copyright strikes. Oh, hey asshole, take our video down, you dipshit. Oh, hello, thank you. I will do. Have a nice day.
And this was the first step to how you became a rich man, and now we speak to you in your penthouse apartment for Film Crack.
Right.
Actually, I was surprised by the sheer number of subscribers that you have. You know, it's well more than anything I've ever been involved in. That's when I went to watch the movie we're talking about today. I was like, holy crap! Not only has this movie does it have a huge number of views through your channel, but also, yeah, the number of subscribers of your channel is nothing to sneeze at.
I mentioned this to Geno a couple of days ago. I'm thinking for another future episode of Film Crack, we might actually want to take a bit of a deep dive into Geno's channel, because in all seriousness, I find it quite the important resource. Your friendship with Ralph Sanentano has resulted in a whole
the real gems,
interesting things, seeing the cold light of day for the first time in a very long time. And I thought it would be interesting to pick and choose a handful of them, because they're all quite short as well. And then plug your channel and also talk about, there's some interesting, I mean, there's some stuff which is, I mean, I think the rarity value somewhat eclipses the entertainment value sometimes, but that's perfectly fine. That's legit that it's being preserved, right? But there are some things that are actually, there are a few things on there that I've watched that I've highly enjoyed and definitely are worth talking about. So,
and I think that's what surprised me about the movie we're going to talk about today, was that comedy is one of those things that can age like milk, rather than fine wine. And yet I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this. I was surprised by how much I laughed. I was surprised by how modern it seemed in a lot of ways. And some of the things that other reviewers complained about when I read reviews, like the kind of almost stream of consciousness, like randomness of it, I thoroughly enjoyed. And even the personalities of Woolsey and like it was just, there was almost something Ren and Stimpy about them, like the kind of the mean cerebral one and the Candide kind of like sweet, I don't know, for me it completely worked. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought, okay, we're going to go back and watch a comedy movie from the 30s. And, and I've seen the Marx Brothers, I've seen the Stooges, and I like that stuff. But I was taken aback by how much I enjoyed this. So I'm excited to talk about it. But I think, you can probably situate it better for us, or for me anyway, in terms of who they specifically were. Wheeler Woolsey.
Yeah, sorry. So what did you choose?
You probably mentioned it in the movie as well at some point.
What did you choose for us, and in context as well, in terms of the film crackness of it all and availability? What are we going to be talking about today, Geno?
Today we're going to be discussing the 1933 Columbia Pictures distributed and produced So This Is Africa, starring Burt Wheeler and Robert Woolsey. I believe directed by Edward Klein. And I chose this for the Film Cracked series primarily because it's the only Wheeler and Woolsey film, aside from one short subject, that is yet to receive a bona fide home video release. Like everything that they've done for RKO, which was like their primary studio, everything from that studio has been released. Like even going as far back as their 1929 stage musical, which was Rio Rita, which they did a film version for RKO. That's been released on DVD, and even going up to their latest, which was High Flyers. Everything from RKO has been released on DVD, thanks to the kind folks over at Warner Archive and Warner Brothers, who now own the rights to the RKO material. But this one lonely Columbia outing, which was the only time that Wheeler and Woolsey had ever worked for a studio outside of RKO, and was, of course, their only Columbia venture. However, Burt would return to Columbia a couple of decades later for two short films. So this was their only outing for Columbia.
So to that point, just sorry to interrupt, do you think that's, does that have something to do with the reason that this is the one that isn't on DVD? Is there some difficulty accessing the Columbia library more so than RKO or whoever has the right? Is that the reason this has fallen into the Film Crack? Is because it is, because from what I understand, there was I think there was a contract negotiation at RKO, right? And in that short gap, this kind of came out while they were still negotiating with RKO, and that's why it ended up at Columbia, right? So
I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think, sadly, what it has more or less to do with is Sony not realizing what they have, because Sony now owns all the Columbia content. Sony not realizing what they have. And there are a lot of people who are clamoring to see this. Even in this butchered version, people are clamoring to see an official video release of this. I mean, you know, we would all love to see those censored bits put back into the film, much like how they replaced all the censored bits back into King Kong. However, I think it's less likely that that'll happen for this particular film. Sadly, because there's probably those lost sequences might actually be lost, but also there might not be much interest in restoring this film from the ground up, which is, I think, what it would need, because, you know, especially from the version that we watched, there were a lot of awkward splices where there was undoubtedly something rather raunchy or risque cut out. So yeah, this film is the one Wheeler and Woolsey film out of all their films that has really fallen through the cracks, and I think deserves to be better appraised, because I think it's one of their best films. Honestly, as a matter of fact, I might put it as like their number 2 or number 3 after what I believe to be their magnum opus, which is also from 1933, which is a film called Diplomaniacs, which is, I believe, the first film that they made when they went back to RKO Radio Pictures.
Yeah, see Magic Morning Wood podcasts for more, where we spoke a trilogy of Wheeler and Wood films. We did Diplomaniacs, Piccerino, and Hips Hips Hooray, right? And yeah, I agree with you. This and Diplomaniacs, I think, are the 2 great Wheeler and Woolsey films. And Diplomaniacs is fascinating for how much it kind of has in common with Marx Brothers' Duck Soup as well. And we'll get to this. There's a Duck Soup connection to So This Is Africa as well, right? In the form of Raquel Torres. So, yes. So, what's the plot of this one then, Geno? Do you want to take a run at a kind of a brief plot synopsis, just to put us in the right place?
You would ask me to do that, wouldn't you, Clive?
I would.
Okay, so basically there's this motion picture studio there's this motion picture studio that's struggling to make a profit, and they realize that Jungle Pictures are making a huge profit for the other studio, so they wind up saying,
Pictures, I believe they're called, right?
Ultimate Pictures, yeah.
Ultimate Pictures, yeah.
Right. I'm surprised they didn't go with the old joke of Miracle Pictures. If it's a good one, it's a miracle.
Right.
Well, anyway, they do have a director in mind to direct this jungle picture in Africa. Her name is Mrs. Johnson Martini, which is actually a takeoff of a real life, at that time, documentary filmmaker, Martin Johnson, I believe.
And his wife Ulsa, right? Ulsa Johnson, who I guess had just had a hit with Congorilla.
Okay.
Right. And so she comes back from Africa with a whole African tribe behind her, and she says, "Oh, well, I was going to shoot the picture, but I'm deathly afraid of animals."
Actually, this whole opening segment really, I was really surprised again by how sophisticated this was in some ways, and how it showed how little we've traveled in that Hollywood genre boom kind of everyone jumps on the bandwagon. It was some years back when there was 18 million Penguin movies because one was successful, and it just shows that clearly Hollywood has always been in this kind of thing of rather than try to do something new, let's do what other people are doing, and let's I thought it was very well that piece of satire at the beginning was very effectively done and well acted.
Yeah, played by Esther Muir as well. The
Esther Muir, yes.
Yeah, that character. It's funny as well. You mentioned that. It's funny. One thing I think to keep in mind while thinking about this film is, I think there's a lot more satire than would be apparent to the modern viewer, because there's a lot of Jungle Pictures would have been around, right? And I think there are some specific gags here that probably flew way over my head because I don't live in 1933. And I'm a bit of a fan of Jungle Pictures, so some of the things that I did notice, I'm guessing maybe more casual viewers wouldn't have noticed, like the fact that you know, they react to stock footage of animals, and like that's
Yes.
a very definite gag at all these other Jingle pictures that use all this stock footage, you know, from Tarzan on down, right?
Mhm.
But anyway, carry on, Gino.
And so where was I? Oh yeah. So she says she's definitely afraid of animals, but then this perky young intern comes in and saves the day when he says, "Hey, I know a couple of these guys with these lions," and they're like, "Oh, we're saved, boys," you know. And they start patting him on the back, and so we pan to this hotel building, and we pan up to one of the top floors where we see our boys, our heroes, Wheeler and Woolsey, practicing how to commit suicide.
This blew my mind again. That like this is edgy humor for 19th. It's edgy humor now, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
certainly edgy humor for then. Yeah.
And the best part about this is how deadpan they deliver it. Like Woolsey, who is the glasses wearing, cigar chomping half of the group.
He's the
like
George Burns lookalike, right? Basically,
Yeah.
Right, the Walter
George
Catlett, Tom Howard looking fella, yes.
Mhm.
And he's like, "You don't got the form right, boy. You don't got the form right. You got to go from the knees, boy. You got to go from the knees," or something like that.
Yeah.
And and I think Burt Wheeler just standing there looking down, eating away on a banana. You know, it's like just perfect visual humor here. But then they get they keep practicing, but then they wind up getting a ring at I believe on the doorbell, because their lions are all sick. Like
They got
have
6 or 7 of them in this penthouse apartment.
right, including one in a bathtub.
Yeah.
And
they look like they're really in the room with them too, which is another thing that struck me about this movie. I was like, those lions look like they're interacting with the stars of this movie. In that way. What was that movie, Roar, where like the Jan de Bont or whatever got savaged, and who was it, Meg Ryan? Who's the anyway, a bunch of people, Goldie Hawn's daughter, I think, or something like that, or
Right.
Tippi Hedren's. Anyway, everyone's getting mauled by actual lions. So immediately I was like, oh, I hope they had people competent on set to keep those lions from mauling anybody.
Well,
but anyway,
we'll get to a little bit later. More dangerous than the lion was that fucking horse. But
yes,
we'll get there.
Exactly. But yes, anyway, so the doctor shows up to treat the lions. Who he has no idea he's there to treat lions, and is not best pleased when he realizes he's been called up as a vet.
right, and so he recommends that these lions, A, go on a strict diet of horse meat, and B, go on a vacation in Africa.
Right.
And so Wheeler and Woolsey, they wind up stopping their plans for suicide, and they wind up going in search of a horse. And meanwhile, they're going down this. There's this great set piece where, you know, they get trapped in an elevator that's falling.
Yeah. That scene was wild.
And so Woolsey winds up calling the and I had to look this up. Look, I live in Connecticut. I've lived here my whole life. I'm 27. I've lived here my whole life. But I had to look up and see if there was, in fact, a GOTUS, Connecticut, the GOTUS elevator community in GOTUS, Connecticut. And update, there is not a GOTUS, Connecticut.
All right.
And so Woolsey winds up calling this GOTUS elevator company, and he's like, "Hey, we're in an elevator and it's falling." And again, the deadpan, how they deliver this, they're falling in an elevator, and they're just like, "This is just Tuesday to us," you know. And so the phone connection is really, really bad, and so Woolsey's trying to spell out, you know, these words, and then
right.
And
As they're falling to their death. He's taking a really long time to get this message across.
And then eventually the elevator winds up crashing, and the doors open up, and they see all these Asian people, and they're like, "Oh boy, did we land in China?" You know, because that was part of the old wives' tale back then.
Yeah. If you dig
And,
down deep enough. Yeah.
And then what it wound up being was they wound up crashing to, I believe, the basement of the hotel or something.
Yeah, the laundry.
It's a Chinese laundry gag.
Laundry. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I suppose to back earlier to a point about why, I suppose that's the other thing as well with so many, potential projects for restoration and stuff. I think anything with problematic racial content nowadays probably goes on the back burner a little bit, right? Which is why another reason why there isn't a clamor, because there's to be fair, I mean, just to put this into a wider context, even though you do have this Chinese laundry gag, and of course there are some, there's like African savage stereotype stuff as well. I mean, this is nowhere near as out and out racist as
no, I was surprised
of his time,
to be honest, by there was very little of that kind of stuff. And even then, like they were just Chinese workers speaking Chinese. Like there wasn't a lot of
it's
over the top stuff there. I was just
exactly.
like, it was
exactly. And for example, the one of the films that this is parodying, the Congarilla film that Matten and also Johnson actually made, that's far more problematic now. I don't know if either of you have ever seen Congarilla, but there's like scenes in that where they choose certain tribesmen and they give them like cigars to smoke and make them dance to jazz records, and the commentary is like, look at the funny little savage, that kind of thing, which is much more problematic.
Wow. I feel like Peter Jackson's King Kong was probably more problematic than So This Is Africa, to be perfectly honest.
I don't remember anything about that, but
Peter Jackson's King Kong, yeah. Go back and watch that and tell me that that's not more troublesome than this is. But yeah, again, the meandering nature of the movie, like, because we kind of lose sight for a little while of like the whole movie producers and needing to, cause they just they're wandering around in the streets trying to kill a horse. Yeah, it's just so strange and awesome.
And a horse almost kills them. I mean, that whole thing. There's like a scene where they get on this carriage, and there's like a is it called a buckboard between the horse and them, and the horse.
So yes,
and the horse
like the little buggy at the back. Yeah,
kicking, and I was thinking
that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's like just a few inches, and Wheeler's getting a
that was Jackie Chan territory. Like somebody's gonna get killed.
We're also missing out on yet another problematic racial stereotype.
Oh, the Italian guy with the broom.
Yes,
that's
Italian. I need to bring this up.
That one jumped out at me for sure.
What do you mean? It's not a problem. I think it's a fine.
Good old Henry Armetta playing that role. They actually, the original censors did not want that to be in the film. They did not want Henry Armetta's role to be in the film. Yeah, they did not want it to be especially known that he was Italian, because Italian audiences were starting to complain about how they were being represented on film. Okay. And so they put Henry Armetta in this anyway. Now, it's lost to time as to how Italian audiences responded to this character at the time, but the Board of Censors were none too pleased that they went ahead with this character anyway. So
I think it's fair to say they probably gesticulated a lot, because that's what Italians do.
That's what the Italian audiences did, is it? Although my favorite Italian audience story is actually from and this is like in Italy, when the movie The Great Silence was released. And spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen The Great Silence, doesn't have a happy ending. And most Westerns tend to have the hero victorious. But anyway, apparently audiences in Sicily stood up and fired pistols into the screen.
Wow.
In 1967 or 68 when that movie was released. So that's an awesome audience reaction, when people are so furious they empty guns into the screen.
Wow.
But yes, so they do find a horse or a donkey of some kind, and there's some puns with calling it a jackass and it getting angry. And
this horse is a step, etc.
Yeah, they even, and Woolsey even turns to Bert and says, "Don't be making an ass of yourself, boy," or something like that. So there's a lot of uses of the word ass in this, and a far more jaded, audience member, from this time period, the 2022 era, would be probably surprised to hear how many times they use the word ass or jackass in this film.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting as well is the mix. I think what's more interesting, so that they deliver that stuff, the pun-based stuff, which is, neither here nor there. Some of it hits, some of it doesn't. But what the stuff that really shines, I think, is, and sometimes it takes a couple of viewings, are the full-on, like, surreal, weird observations that they make, and are delivered without, hey, they're not like zingers, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of, there's a whole thing where Woolsey claims that his grandfather died when he was a child, and Woolsey,
Right.
so your grandfather died when he was a child, did he? You need to have a lie down or something like that. He says.
Yes, yeah.
That stuff's great.
Yeah. It's another surprising line, and I didn't catch it until I saw it written out in a review. But when they when they do then go back to, what even happens to the horse? Like, I've lost track. It's the movie so mad. What happens to the horses? They just run away.
I assume the lions eat it. I don't know. Oh no, it does run away, and then part of their deal. So that's basically the we'll get.
Yeah, the horse chases after them. The horse chases after
right.
them, and they run. And then they wind up running back into the hotel.
Right, and then part of their deal to go.
That's how they get back in and meet the producers.
Yeah.
Okay, but then so there's all of these supposedly African folks, some of whom assume to be actually maybe African American, and some of whom appear to be people who are in blackface.
There's blackface in this film.
Yeah, sure. But somebody says, like, check out those Africans, and it's like, when I saw it, it was like written as hyphenated, as in like cans meaning boobs, and I was like, oh, that's another.
There's actually a line that Woolsey says later.
Well, I know later in the movie that's way more shocking.
Yeah.
The Nutcracker scene.
Yes.
But just there's a lot of, and I think this is one of the problems obviously people had with the movie, was that there's a surprising amount of innuendo.
Do you want to? I wasn't going to bring this up until we started talking about the censorship, but I figured I could do so now.
Yeah. I
actually have right with me the book Wheeler and Woolsey, the vaudeville comic duo and their films 1929 to 1937, written by Edward Watts with a foreword by Burt Wheeler's comedy partner Tom DeLonge and Dorothy Lee, who was in a lot of their films together.
Awesome.
Is that a recommended read?
Absolutely, it's really the only really definitive study on Wheeler and Woolsey, at least that I'm aware of. There also is a book out there by my friend Irv Hyatt, but I've yet to really take a deep dive into that, so I can't really discuss that book at length here. Mm-hmm. But here's a little passage from the book when it discusses So This Is Africa. On February 16th, 1933, the National Board of Review screened So This Is Africa and rejected the entire film, hurling broadsides at the picture. Quote, "Nothing as salacious has ever come before the National Board in 8 years of reviewing. It outrages every common standard of decency, has absolutely nothing to recommend it. The board would harm itself if it were to pass such a picture."
So it was the cannibal holocaust of its time, apparently.
Yes.
I was very interested to see that they were bummed out. And like, if you think 25 minutes of the running time has been excised from this movie, and then what's left? And you're like, well, what was going on in that other 25 minutes? Because what's left is eyebrow raising, I think, for the times, for sure.
Right. I mean, the thing that a lot of casual viewers don't realize, whenever you think of films from the 1930s, a lot of people tend to think of like later 30s films, like, Follow the Yellow Brick Road with Dorothy and Gone with the Wind and stuff that's really relatively harmless. But then you go a little earlier in the decade and you start seeing stuff like Babyface, like Night Nurse, So This Is Africa, any myriad of the Wheeler Woolsey films. And you start to see how gritty and urban and really raunchy and risque they were back then.
Or just mad, like the movie Maniac, with the guy who eats cat's eyeballs, and suddenly girls are topless, and you're like, what decade does this come from? But yeah, no, as I said, they.
Do we
Sorry,
know?
guys.
Do we know what's missing? Right? Do we know what was in that 25 minutes? Like,
I wonder if there's more of the Amazons, because it seems like they seem like a big part of the story, and yet they actually don't take up that much of the screen time. When they, because they do find this Amazon, which is hilarious. Because when I was reading the plot description before I watched the movie, I was like, well, wait, the Amazon is in South America, but then I got it was the other kind of Amazons, the female tribe, who are all white ladies. But yeah, I wondered if there was just more of them dancing around and being.
Yeah, well,
being cute.
here we go. This is what they were considering censoring. Eliminate following dialogue. Woolsey, quote, now you take the hot water bottle. Has that done away with marriage? Bird, quote, what's the hot water bottle got to do with marriage? Woolsey, quote, what's the hot water bottle got to do with marriage? Listen, you're lying in bed, right? You're cold. What is it you long for? What is it you cry for? What is it you need more than anything in the world? Bert, quote, not a hot water bottle. and also, to your point earlier, eliminate views of group of native girls removing their outer garments and wiggling their hips.
Okay.
So there you go.
But but what remains is still is pretty good. I also like, for instance, the mosquito with the rotating stinger.
Oh yeah,
that's excellent.
Cool. Yeah,
I fully laughed out loud at that. That was a really great gag.
I laughed out loud quite a lot, actually, and yeah, like you said, Nick, I think especially if you're not used, if you make assumptions about a certain era's comedy being out of date, then it really is surprising how it can still, because it's so. I mean, some of it's just good gag writing, right?
Yeah.
But then also, on the other hand, on top of that, you mentioned the surreality of it. It's like it's gone round full circle, that it's fresh again, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, they don't do anything like this nowadays. Like
no, it almost like it was like Monty Python 50 years before, 40 years before, like doing things that were truly surreal. The whole part where they're all having these moments of like thinking really deep thoughts, and we're hearing their thoughts, and then at certain
that was enough
hear...
Edward O'Neill's strange interlude.
Right. Okay, interesting.
Right.
I was wondering what that was, because that was clearly a reference to something that went flying over my head. So it's good to know where that came from. Also, I'm always glad to see my second favorite man in a gorilla suit, Charles Gamora, as
I was wondering if it was so it wasn't Crash. I was hoping
wasn't Ray Crash Corrigan. No, it's Charles
okay. I was hoping it was
Crash. Actually, according to the book, it's Clarence Morehouse as the gorilla.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, according to this book here, it's Clarence Morehouse.
It's a good suit too. It's not distracting. I was like, I almost was like, hang on, but like, no, it's not a real monkey, but it works well enough.
I'm just going to check if I'm remembering this wrong. Like, that's what they have at the IMDb, right? I think, which is not necessarily a guarantee that it's true.
No.
Oh, no.
Wikipedia for film, yeah.
Oh, no, hang on. Charles Gamora is Josephine. Clarence Morehouse is another gorilla, according to the IMDb.
Okay. There's more than one. Okay.
So maybe the other gorilla was cut out, maybe, I don't know. This other person, Clarence Morehouse, I'm not familiar with, and they don't have. They have 5 credits on the IMDb, only 2 as gorillas. So they weren't the committed gorilla suit actor as Charles Gamora or Ray Crash Corrigan.
Yeah, and who? Sorry, I mean, you guys know, I can't remember her name, but the actress who plays Tarzana.
Raquel Torres.
And so she was in some of the Marx Brothers stuff as well then?
Yeah, she played Vera Markel, who was the female assistant to the dictator Trentino in their classic film Duck Soup.
Okay.
And she was supposed to have a romantic subplot with Zeppo originally, but that wound up getting cut.
Okay.
She was also in a whole bunch of sexy exotic. She's in the Sea Bat as well, which is
Okay. Yeah, because she's hot. I was time. Yeah. If I had a time machine and I wasn't married, I would look her up. She is.
Yes.
I was impressed. She was a cutie. She definitely kept my attention.
Just got all of her day.
Yeah. I mean, great, and good comic timing. That was one thing I was reading in the review that said that they were both given a lot more to do, both of those lead actresses, than they ever were in the Marx Brothers. They were allowed to be comedians, right? In a way, they weren't just the, good looking, or like straight characters. They were like allowed to be comedic characters.
Right.
And Wheeler and Woolsey fans who like Esther Muir will be happy to know that she later appears with them again as Woolsey's wife in their penultimate film from 1937, On Again, Off Again. And she also appears in around the same time in, I believe, I would like to say 36 or 37, with the Marx Brothers in their film A Day at the Races.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
And she gets good comic mileage out of being so much taller than Woolsey.
Yes.
Bending him over all the time to kiss him. There's, it works.
Right.
And the weird thing is in this film, and this sort of carries through a lot of their films, and people who are fans of the Wheeler and Woolsey films might turn this off after I say this, but there's a weird layer of sort of like almost either homosexuality or bisexuality that runs through their films, because it's like Woolsey is getting kissed by this. Go ahead.
No, I wouldn't disagree, especially with where the movie goes near the end, where there's quite a lot of cross dressing, and then
babies that look like,
and then non-binary stuff going on at the end. I was like, wow, again, but not just played for laughs. There's something else going on there. Transgressive, but in a fun way. I thought it was cool.
I don't think it was a condescending like ha, they're gay kind of thing. It was more just going just for different territory, right? Just
anything's open for like, if it's funny, it's funny.
Yeah,
like that almost felt like to me.
I have a specific question for you, actually, Geno, because I was wondering if you might be able to answer this about this film, but also more generally. And this is something that I don't know, actually, and I think it's a kind of an interesting question. So this is a Wheeler and Woolsey vehicle, right? And if you watch enough Wheeler and Woolsey vehicles, you get to see that they have a definite. They both have definite personalities, and they have turns of phrases, and they have chemistry and all that or whatever. But what's interesting to me is, so for instance, in the case of So This Is Africa, in the opening credits, there's one credited screenwriter. In this case, Norman Krasna. Right? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, Krasna. So I suppose what I'm wondering is how much of the comedy has been written by this Krasna as a kind of framework, and then Wheeler and Woolsey come along and kind of combine their shtick with it, or is it them just adapting their routine to something that someone else has written? Because it seems very, I've seen a few Wheeler and Woolsey films now, and it seems very Wheeler and Woolsey. Like, it doesn't seem as if it's someone else has written something for them to perform. It seems like it's coming from them, would be my educated guess. So what do you think about stuff like that in terms of, the credited writers and what the credited writers actually did, and what did Wheeler and Woolsey bring? And do you have any insight? Or you and Nick as well, you might know, but
I have no idea.
A bit more of the expert here. I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
Well, I don't know. I don't think Wheeler and Woolsey ever ad-libbed per se, but I think that they brought a lot of their comic energy, and I think a lot of it has to do with more or less their delivery. And I think it has more or less to do with Norman Krasna tailoring the script to Wheeler and Woolsey's comedic style, which was, again, primarily based in raunchy, risque double entendres and pre-code humor, which is why once you get to the post-code films that Wheeler and Woolsey did, they sort of suffer and they're sort of hard to sit through because the humor suffers for that. But there are some good films during that time period. Anyway, yeah, I think it's more or less Norman Krasna tailoring the comedy to Wheeler and Woolsey's specialty.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't think it's a case of Wheeler and Woolsey being, uncredited co-scripters, at least when it came to fashioning gags?
Well, they might have contributed things here and there, but I think it was mostly reliant on the screenwriter.
Okay, that's interesting because that's not that's slightly counterintuitive, right? I think, but that's interesting, and I certainly defer to you on this one because you know a lot more about this world than I do. But that's kind of interesting, is that, I mean, that's a kind of talent in itself, right? Where you can just hand something to two people and go, okay, make that funny, like.
Well, from a different area of interest, I'm a big fan of David Ruffin, who was the former lead singer of The Temptations and had a rather underrated solo career as a solo artist. And with the exception of maybe a few songs, most notably the song Statue of a Fool, David Ruffin rarely ever wrote his own material. So most of his material is being fed to him by like the Motown staff writers and such. But it's what he does with the readings of that stuff, because they tailor it to David Ruffin. They know he's the guy who sings about begging and anguish and broken hearts and being lonely and being and pining away for his beloved and stuff like that. So they write the material to correspond with the particular artist. And I think it's very true, very much the same case in comedy, especially of this sort.
Well, I suppose what's interesting there to that example then is yes, I see what you're saying, but you mentioned the Motown writers, and they're straight away out the gate. I suppose that's they're the Motown writers, right? So they're they're not chopped liver, right? And I suppose in the case of someone like Norman Krasna, and I don't know anything about Norman Krasna, but because I don't know anything about Norman Krasna, and then I looked at his filmography, it's probably just because ignorance of the films that he's written. He might have written.
But there is a second. Am I not wrong in thinking that there's a second writer who asked for their name to be taken off because of all the cuts?
Oh, okay.
This is what I don't know if that's true, but I had read that there was a second writer whose name is not on the credits because he was frustrated by how much of the movie was.
But
removed.
Even so, I mean, I'm guessing that second writer's name probably isn't going to jump out at us either as like, oh, of course, it's, So I'm just wondering if Norman Krasna might have been a really hilarious writer, but what I mean is, looking at his filmography, nothing jumped out at me like other comedy classics of the era, for example, to make me think that he was a particularly hot comedy writer. So I was just kind of fascinated by that. I was very interested to know how that whole thing worked. If Wheeler and Woolsey worked on the screenplay, or if they just turned up on set and they just got handed some sides and they're like, have at it, boys, make it as funny as you can, kind of thing. I mean, I suppose it wouldn't surprise me either way, because a certain amount of chaos could breed this kind of surreal anarchism as well, right? Maybe even more so than something carefully scripted and considered in advance.
Wheeler's kind of whole thing, like his whole personality, is something that was a bit new to me in a way. I know that there's these candid or these kind of like innocent characters in comedy sometimes, but he really had something carved out that seemed very specific to him that I really, really liked, and I kind of want to see more. It almost reminded me of a much later. Geno, have you ever seen Father Ted, the Irish comedy show about the priests?
Yes, I've seen a little bit of that.
Okay, there's one priest called Father Dougal, who's a bit kind of
Dougal
lost
Maguire. Yeah.
and quite sweet, but kind of not very bright in a way. And for some reason, there was something slightly about what Wheeler's doing that reminded me of that, and it calls to me. I really like that kind of like the nice guy, sweet, childish, childlike character that he plays. It's a great character.
He seems much younger than Woolsey, doesn't he? I mean, I don't know what the age gap was, but the character seems much younger.
Yes, yeah. But I guess he wasn't. Maybe Geno, you could talk about this, but am I right? I don't know again if this is true, but I read that Woolsey had some sort of an accident quite early on in his movie career that led to him basically having kidney damage and then getting sicker and sicker as time went on.
I think that story has sort of been debunked by some of the Wheeler and Woolsey aficionados, but what I think people might be conflating that with was early on in his life, Woolsey had actually started out as a jockey, and he had fallen off of a horse, and that's what made him have to give up being a jockey, and that's what led him to be a stage actor, and then later on a comedian. So it might have even been as far back as that that's what was the catalyst for his eventual undoing.
Right.
But I don't think it was as a result of any sort of mishap on set.
Okay.
In that case, fair play for him to getting so close to this dangerous fucking horse in this film. Like, despite obviously having been traumatized by a horse before.
But
he did die quite young, right?
Yes, I think during the filming of their last film, High Flyers, his last scene is with Lupe Velez, and he performs a musical number called "I'm a Gaucho," and you would never know that he's sick because he's doing these wild dance movements and playing this tambourine and everything. And he was like that day running 100 and something on degree fever with the kidney disease, and right after filming that scene, he was confined to a bed for a year until he died. So you got to give it up to the tenacity of these veteran performers from back then.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, no, as I said, I have to say, thank you for making the movie available, and thank you for suggesting it, because I had no idea that I would love this as much as I did. You should
probably check out Diplomaniacs next.
Okay, that'll be my next for sure.
But and when you do check that out, please keep in mind that they're poking fun at everybody, not just specific races or specific demographics. They're poking fun at everybody in that film, and I think that that's something that's lost in a lot of modern day viewers.
Right. But that's the way I kind of felt about So This Is Africa as well. That it was much broader in its. I never felt like it was targeting anyone in a way that I was like, oh, that's mean. It felt like everyone was fair game for mockery or for jokes, or
apart from maybe Josephine the gorilla.
Yeah, they were a bit mean to Josephine.
No one wants to get it on with Josephine.
And what's that?
There was actually a little bit more of that was gonna be in the film originally. There's gonna be some little hints at maybe some bestiality. I read that maybe Woolsey. Yeah, I heard that maybe Woolsey and Josephine had an affair, was being intimated, and then that was one of the things they were like, nope, cut that out.
Maybe some Ingagi references or something.
Well, people forget how big of a film Ingagi was when that came out. That was a massive film. I mean, it was even referenced in Our Gang comedies of the time. So it was a massive film when it came out. And no doubt that, this is what, 33? I mean, not only, obviously King Kong is, in the back of people's minds, but also films like Ingagi from like only a couple of years earlier. And also films like Esther Muir, she came right out and said, hey, we're making a parody of Trader Horn. We're making a parody of Frank Buck pictures. This is what we're trying to parody here. So,
and to Clive's point, that scene actually was one of my favorites. Was the one where they start, like they bring out the guns to shoot at the various pieces of stock footage, and then the second one is like, shoot that panther, and they just cut to a scene of a giraffe. And then the last one, that rhinoceros is charging us, and it runs forward, and then it starts running back in reverse. Oh, it's all right. It's okay. The film's in reverse now. Like that.
My favorite
really
part of that whole sequence is though the tribe that's running backwards.
On the backwards tribe, yeah.
Woolsey's like, this is the backwards tribe of Africa. Why? And then Wheeler's like, why are they running backwards? And Woolsey's like, they don't want to know where they're going. They just like to know where they've been.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. Yes, and then even like having a joke about like starting off with the slightly like, oh, backwards, Africa, and then no, it's actually literally a joke about them running backwards, like just to play with expectations that the movie consistently does. And yeah, and then go ahead.
No. Sorry to I mean, the floor is open. That's about all I personally have to say about This Is Africa. I think it's a gem that's definitely worth seeking out. So if there's anything we haven't mentioned, now is your time, or fellow forever hold your peace.
Let's talk about that Nutcracker scene.
Oh yes, let's. Yes, that's
Okay.
A surprising piece of dialogue for 1933. Yeah.
Yes. So they're all essentially there's I think an eclipse that has happened, and Woolsey, Wheeler, and Estamure are all sitting around because they've sort of been captured by Amazons, and so they're being, I guess, fed by these Amazons and being waited on by these Amazons. And one of the Amazons is wearing this necklace. And of course, all the Amazons in this film are scantily clad. They're wearing just like bras and like tiny little loincloths and everything. And so Woolsey, sees this necklace, and, turns out, gets this giant like nutcracker, and he's like cracking the nuts off of her necklace. And he's like, have a nut, Wilbur. And he looks straight at this Amazon's breasts. And Woolsey, in 1933, Woolsey says, nice tits too.
Yeah. I was taken aback. I was like, wow, okay, thanks, Andrew Dice Clay. Like that's yeah, that's early for using a word like that. And actually that whole the innuendo of that whole thing, that they're basically going to be screwed to death by these Amazons. That's what's clearly being intimated, is that like
and they don't mind as well.
Yeah, they're like,
bring it on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just this pure visual gag of him leaning over and cracking the nuts on it is a funny gag in and of itself, right? It's
yeah, no,
right.
No, it's
so I think we're all very much in favor of So This Is Africa.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, and what about when again, I want to mention, sort of like the sort of like tinge of homosexuality. I mean, there's this sequence where Estamure is constantly like kissing Woolsey on the lips, and he's like very adverse to it. Like he's like, no, I don't, like, stop your kissing me. But then later on, like Wheeler, dresses in drag, as he was known to do in a lot of their films. Like one of the best examples of Burt Wheeler dressing in drag is in their film Peach Arena, where he delivers one of the most classic lines I've ever heard. No, I can't be a woman. I'm not masculine enough. And that whole film is marvelous, Nick. I highly recommend you checking that one out. And so Wheeler dresses in drag to pretend like he's one of the Amazons so that they don't get boinked to death, and so Wheeler and Woolsey wind up getting married to each other,
right.
and it's like, and then they walk down the aisle, and it's like, oh, so what happens now? You go on your honeymoon with him, with her,
right? Yes, yeah. And he's like, what happens? Like, what happens on a honeymoon? He's like, I don't know. I've never married a man before. Like, it was just
you're my first husband.
You're my first husband. Yeah.
Forgot to mention as well that this is a semi-musical, including a Minnie the Moocher parody song.
Yeah, I love that number.
Yeah, and if anyone has never seen the Betty Boop Minnie the Moocher animation with Cab Calloway being rotoscoped, that's also essential viewing. That thing is one of the creepiest fucking cartoons I've ever seen in my life. Brilliant. Yes.
Yeah, no.
Right. So I think we're going
I-
to bring
I
this
loved it.
to a close because we're in danger of running longer than the film.
Than the actual movie. Yeah.
So yes, thank you, Geno, for
Yep.
curating this episode. You're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, and the internet should thank you for making this movie available
Yes,
to
yes,
anyone who wants to see it.
And shall we? And we
Because
shall
otherwise, we
return,
wouldn't be seeing it.
we shall return to Geno's house of rare films, sitcoms, pancakes, whatever in the future. I think with a hand-picked selection. So so watch
Absolutely.
this space.
Yep.
So until then, it's been me, Clive Davis, him,
Woohoo!
and him up there.
Geno Cuddy.
Right. See you then. That was smooth, wasn't it, lads?
Yeah, oh yeah, that was a great outfit. They're all gold, Clive.